Welcome to the Common Gavel, brought to you by the Grand Lodge of Maryland. The Common Gavel features Masonic stories and news from across the state of Maryland. Now from the Grand Lodge of Maryland, here's your host, Director of Communications, Tom Foster.
Welcome to the Common Gavel podcast, the podcast that is all about the Maryland Masonic family. It's truly a busy time for all Masons. We have last-minute exemplifications going on as men prepare to take the East. And of course, in just a few days, we will install a new Grand Master and Deputy Grand Master. It's an exciting time of transition and growth. To get the show started, we usually hear from our Grand Master and Deputy Grand Master. This time we have something special in store for the Grand Master's message. So to kick things off, let's hear first from our Deputy Grand Master and Grand Master-elect, Brother Richard Nagel.
PG, EFOL, AT. No, they are not chemical symbols or movie rating standards. They are the letters for the mission of every lodge in Maryland. What is your lodge doing to meet these goals? PG, working to obtain and, more importantly, retain members should be the driving force for a lodge. In order for your lodge to be successful, you must first have members. At the Grand Lodge, we employ a statewide strategy to help all lodges be successful. Using television, radio, and internet are our primary means of communication. Our Membership Public Awareness Committee is working on alternative ways of reaching out to the community at large. They have recently conducted a survey of newer Master Masons and received feedback concerning reasons for joining, Masonic education, satisfaction with their progress thus far in the fraternity, and positive and negative aspects from their perception. These results will help us deliver an approach to those quality individuals we are seeking to attract to help us achieve positive growth. EFOL is a focus for our second or Membership Retention Committee. They are formulating ideas of events to involve current members to keep their interest. At the Grand Lodge, we have several each year: Harvest Home Day, Bull and Oyster Roast, Family Day Picnic, and the Grand Master's Gala. Some new ones include table lodges or festive boards, low veils, and a community wellness day. Your lodge should be having at least 3 or 4 family events each year. Some have them more often and have had much success. Having an engaged, family-oriented lodge can help strengthen not only your membership, but improve attendance at meetings. AT may be our weakest area within a lodge and even Grand Lodge. We are working to improve this with our Masonic Academy and Speakers Bureau. The Fellow and Pillar of the Craft have improved our education outreach. Our museum and library are a great resource for further education. Much more needs to be done at the Grand Lodge, and especially local lodges. Education should be a major part of every meeting of a lodge. Social gatherings of brothers can play a large role in furthering Masonic knowledge. Whatever your lodge does, it needs to be actively teaching about Masonry. Last month I mentioned about 2 trips planned for 2019 and 2020. Our cruise to New England and Canada has over 100 already signed up. If you are interested, contact Florence Littleton at 410-529-3553. Our trip to Germany in 2020 can be reserved through Gate 1 Travel at www.gate1travel.com/custom groups/CEU 1547193. This can be found in the Compass Points that comes out monthly. On November 17th, we will have the 232nd Annual Communication of the Grand Lodge. Many important reports concerning the state of the craft will be shared. That evening will be the installation of officers at 7 p.m. I hope many are able to attend. If you're unable to attend, it will be live streamed again this year. Look for information in the coming issues of the Common Gavel and on our Facebook pages. I look forward to a great year as we continue spreading the light of Masonry while maintaining our integrity.
From the Grand Lodge of Maryland, you're listening to the Common Gavel podcast.
Instead of our usual Grand Master's message this month, we wanted to sit down and chat with the Grand Master as he reflects on his time in office and his Masonic life in general. So let's start at the beginning. Brother Gus Vourvoulas, why did you become a Mason?
When I was about 8 years old, maybe a little less than that, my uncle and aunt used to live right across the street from the Lodge. And I was with my uncle one time, and he said, I'd like to be a Mason. He says, because I hear a lot of good men belong to that fraternity. Well, he never did. And when I got married several years later, my father-in-law was a Mason. And I asked him about it, and he brought me a petition. And 13 years later, I decided to fill it out and petition the Lodge. So that's how I kind of got started.
What do you remember about your degree process? Anything that stands out?
I remember being with the other 6 men in my class that we became very close because I feel that being with a man 5 days a week, which we did that back then, 2 hours a night, you become close to the guys that you come into fraternity with. So it's kind of being a fraternity within a fraternity, and it was great with those 7 guys.
Who was your Masonic mentor, and why do you think of him as such?
Well, I had 3 or 4 of the older brethren when I come in I became friendly with, and they kind of guided me through the process and teaching me how to be a Mason. The one I remember most is a brother by the name of Buck Shenton. He was my officer instructor and got me through all of my degree work. And he also was my tutor because he was a past master and taught me things about being a master of a lodge and how to conduct myself and how to conduct business meetings, just those kind of things. But he was very helpful when problems would come up. And he was, very insightful when we spoke.
Tell us about your time in the East at the Lodge as worshipful master.
I had a couple of pretty bad experiences. My year in 1991, we had some problems at the Lodge Financial, and we had to work through those. But the good part about that situation was the fact that most of the brothers rallied around the situation that we had. We were in kind of dire financial straits, and we sold chairs in the lodge and various other things, and we had men pay as much as $2,000 to put their name on the master's chair, and everybody else $100 here and $100 there. So we were able to weather the storm, and it really showed that when the times get tough, the guys get together and they'll weather the storm and put us back on track. And my lodge is doing very well right now.
All right, confession time. What's the biggest goof you've ever made in lodge, either in ritual or protocol or anything you did where you just wanted to kick yourself afterwards?
Oh, yeah. Most everybody who was in the Grand Lodge, I guess it was the semi-annual communication back in 2007 when I was senior Grand Deacon, most worshipful pants Grandmaster Biggs was coming into the lodge, into the Grand Lodge, and I had never really been seated up front where normally the senior Grand Deacon is. And we had rehearsed the night previous, so I knew my part. Hey, what's the big deal? Well, when Grandmaster Biggs was announced, everybody knows that the 2 deacons go down and bring him in under staffs. I didn't move. I stayed there the entire time. Thought this was really neat watching everybody coming through and on. I just stood there. And finally, Grandmaster Biggs came in, and I didn't think anything of it. So finally, right after the entire thing was over, one of the brothers came to me, and I can't remember who it was. And he said, Gus. I said, what? He said, you're supposed to go down there and under staffs. I said, yeah, okay. So from that time, the Grand Lecturer, Paul Fischel, calls that a Vourvoulas. So that is my biggest goof. And the thing about it is I was always told when I was a kid, if you're going to make a mistake, make it a big one. So I decided to wait till Grand Lodge and do it there instead of just doing it in my home lodge. So that is the biggest goof I've ever done.
When did you decide you wanted to stand for Grand Master?
I guess it was as I was coming to the end of my year as Junior Grand Warden. And the thing about it is being a warden is just a ceremonial position for the most part. You really have no role in what the business or anything of the Grand Lodge. But, of course, back then I was also on the board of managers. I was a DGL at large. So those are the things that I kind of had an inkling of what was going on in the Grand Lodge, and especially being on the board of managers. So I thought that, I just didn't want to leave it go at that. I felt that there was the only logical place to go was to be a candidate for deputy. And so that's what made me decide I wanted to do. I wanted to give to the fraternity more, and that I felt the only way I could do that at this time was to try that and be a candidate for deputy and serve the craft as best as I could.
When you were elected, what were your first few thoughts? The
first thing that went through my head, I thought about you always see on cartoons and other things about the dog chasing the car. Well, I was the dog chasing the car, but I'm the dog that caught the car. And then I said, well, what do I do with it now that I've caught it? So that was the first thing that went through my mind. And so I was very happy when I finally won the election, but it was one of those things that, oh my gosh, I did what I wanted to do. I got it. So I have to figure out where I'm going to go from here. I had some basic ideas, but you really don't know exactly what you're going to do until you finally step in one of the seats when I became deputy. And Grandmaster Weibel was a great mentor to me. And so he kind of led me through the process.
We all know a special lady has been by your side every step of the way. Tell us about Lady Cheryl's role over the past 4 years. It's
difficult to talk about this without being emotional. Cheryl has been with me since I became a Mason, and she encouraged me to go in line and become master of my lodge. And every time I've come up with something new that I wanted to do, she's always been there supporting me. And so I can't say enough on our travels throughout various parts of the country and even over to England. She's been with me on every trip that I've taken. I really wouldn't want to do one of these without her being there because she's very supportive. And I think she's done an absolutely tremendous job being the First Lady of Maryland because she's very friendly. She gets along with people, knows how to speak to people, and it was just incredible. And she's been my rock throughout this entire thing. And many times throughout my 2 years as Grand Master, when I've come home saying to myself, boy, I don't know if I can do this anymore, or boy, what a mess I've got on my hands now. She's always encouraged me to continue on, and I've been able to bounce some ideas off of her. So she's been there to advise me, and she's been great. I can't say enough for her.
Looking back on your term as Grand Master, what accomplishment or accomplishments are you most proud of? One of the things that I am most proud of is I wanted to bring fun into Masonry. We always talk about if you go to the shrine or you go to the Cedars, that's where you have fun. Well, that's not true. We are a fraternal organization, but we're a family organization, and we need to bring fun into Freemasonry. And we've tried to accomplish that, and I think we've done a fairly decent job. When we did our installations for the last 2 years, they haven't been real rigid and strict and by the book. We've had fun doing them, and we've joked around with the people, and they've enjoyed it because let's face it, if you come to an installation and you just see a bunch of men bringing somebody to the altar, he takes an obligation, and another guy gets up and runs about a minute worth of speech to him, walks back. People on the sideline,
they don't enjoy that, and they were looking to get done. So, we brought that element into it. We've also had the ability to have some kids programs or young people, and I've enjoyed doing that more than a lot of things. So those are the kind of things that I hope to bring back into the fraternity. And I think I've been partially successful anyway.
What are some of your favorite memories as Grand Master?
I remember we were in Cumberland, and I can't tell you what lodge we were installing at the time. It was a morning, installation, and we were going through, and it was time to install the secretary and the treasurer. And the secretary's son, who was probably 5 or 6, was sitting next to him, and he was there because the secretary's wife had to work that day, and he brought his son to the lodge, which is great. And so anyway, we were ready to install them, and I happened to glance over and saw the young man, and I said to the secretary, I said, "Is that your assistant?" And he said, "Yeah." So I said, "Okay, stand him up." And I think the marshal escorted him to the altar, and we went through the obligation with the secretary and treasurer. They stood up, and the Grand Secretary and Grand Treasurer presented them with their jewels. And there's the young man standing there. Well, we're not going to do that. So the Grand Marshal escorted the young man to the east. I took one of my Grand Master's pins, put it on his collar, and said, "Hey, now you're the Assistant Secretary of this lodge." And took him back to the altar. And then the Grand Treasurer and Grand Secretary did their charges and escorted the men, and the Grand Marshal escorted the young man back to the Secretary's desk. So I think that is absolutely my fondest memory of for the last 2 years, was doing something with one of the kids.
You were also fortunate to be able to, the timing was right, you got to go to England for the 300th. That's got to be a lifetime memory.
That was a phenomenal thing, and some of the people who've seen the videos know how tremendous that show was. Just being in the Royal Albert Hall was phenomenal, and the acoustics and the everything was tremendous there. And not only that, but the being able to meet men from literally around the world. There was 133 Grand Masters there, I believe. And what a phenomenal showing. And we were the 13th oldest jurisdiction there, which was really great. I remember I was being asked by Roman Volsky, who was the Grand Master of the District of Columbia at the time. And it just so happens the way it worked out, I was always in the front row because of being the 13th oldest. And he asked me, how do you get in the front row? I said, you got to be old. So that was about that. But that was a great time also. I was very fortunate to be able to be in position to do that and to be able to sign my name in their guest book as the 13th oldest jurisdiction there was a tremendous honor.
If you could communicate one idea to every Mason, what would that be?
I've been pounding this for the last couple of months, and just because of the way of the world at this time. And our tenets of brotherly love, relief, and truth have to be spread throughout the world, and there's just no way we cannot do that. Even if you're speaking to a non-Mason, you have to communicate those things and tell those men that, and everybody around it, this is the way we have to live our lives, because we're just going down the road of no return, the way our society, not only in this country but around the world, seems to be going. And not only that, we can't agree to disagree anymore. At least in the fraternity, if you disagree with a brother, you can sit down and talk to him. You may not convince him, and he may not convince you, but you shake your hand and off you go, and you're still friends. If you take our politicians, and you're either with me or you're against me. There's no middle road the way it used to be, and that's why I really feel that the condition of our country is directly related to the way they act in Washington. And we have the obligation as a fraternity to spread our message and tell people, how we feel and how we should be. And there's just no two ways about it. And if we in this world don't do that soon, and I hope our children pick up the mantle and go ahead and do that, because we, as this previous generations, have not done a good job on having our society work the way it should work. So that's the biggest thing I would communicate to our brothers, is to tell the outside world what Masonry is all about and how we should be as a people.
Now that you're nearing the end of your term, what will you do when you hand off that gavel and top hat?
Being able to stay home a couple of nights a week, I think, is about the best thing. Having Cheryl not ask me every morning, are you coming home for dinner or not? Am I expected to be somewhere or not? We have a condo down in Melbourne, Florida, and we'll be going down there sometime in the middle of January after my lodge's installation, and we'll spend to the end of March, because I'm a big baseball fan and I just love going to our spring training baseball. So I'm going to enjoy that. And then we'll come back and I'll get back into the swing of things up here. I'm sure I'll find something to do as far as the fraternity is concerned. And I've got 4 years of honeydews sitting on the table at home, and where I haven't had the opportunity to do them. So that's the things I'm going to be doing, and giving back to Cheryl everything she has given up for me over the last actually 6 years. So,
do you have any advice for anyone looking to be a part of the leadership of the Grand Lodge of Maryland?
Well, I think the biggest thing you have to remember is that as a leader, in whether you're a worshipful master or a Grand Lodge officer or whatever you may be, you have to be the person willing to serve the craft. There's no possible way that the craft serves you. You are here at their, what's the word I'm looking for? They're here because you are here because they put you here, and they had the confidence in you to elect you to that position. And it's incumbent on you to remember that you're here to serve the craft to the best of your ability. The craft isn't here to serve you. So as long as you keep that in the back of your mind and treat a brother the way he's supposed to be treated, because I may have been elected Grand Master, but I'm a Master Mason, okay? And in a couple of weeks, I won't have the front parking spot at the Grand Lodge. I won't have a front parking spot at the Scottish Rite, okay? I come down those 3 steps and I'm back with everybody. But you got to remember, too, I was not away from everybody either. I was always there. So I was a Master Mason before I became Deputy and Grand Master, and I will be a Master Mason when I leave being Grand Master. So that's the things you really have to be conscious of.
Visit the Grand Lodge of Maryland online at mdmasons.org.
Welcome to Chips from the Quarry, the Common Gavel guide to practical Freemasonry. As entered apprentices, we're taught to make use of the Common Gavel for the noble purpose of divesting ourselves of the vices and superfluidities of life. The Common Gavel is the tool we are to use to shape our lives and improve ourselves in Masonry. But the question begs, how exactly do we use this tool in our everyday lives? Operative Masons use the Common Gavel to shape a rough stone a little at a time in order to make sure it fits properly in its place within a larger structure. The same way that a sculptor uses a chisel to slowly reveal the beauty hidden inside a common stone. The lesson we can take from this is to understand that self-improvement through Masonry is a process that must be undertaken slowly by knocking off one rough edge at a time. A simple way to apply this lesson in your daily life is to make a list of 5 or 10 things you'd like to improve about yourself. We all have those rough edges, and each man must be self-aware enough to identify his own rough edges. When you've made your list, Pick one thing from that list to focus on. Say, for example, like many of us, you've got the habit of using profanity when you're upset or frustrated. This is an area you could improve for a week or two or however long it takes. Focus on improving your conduct in this regard. When you feel as though you've made some progress, take a look at another item on your list and work through it in the same way. When you've completed your list, make another list and the process begins again. Visualize the man you want to become in exactly the same way that the operative mason visualizes the stone he needs to go in a particular area of a structure. Then commit to slow, steady, careful, and consistent self-improvement. In this way, you'll be shaping yourself as one of those living stones and be applying the Common Gavel to its noble and glorious purpose.
A podcast all about the Maryland Masonic family. This is the Common Gavel Podcast.
Time once again for Tom's Trivia. Last time we asked you, what's the difference between a Cowan and an eavesdropper? Well, a Cowan is simply someone who is pretending to be a Mason, and an eavesdropper is someone who stands close to a building, so close as to be under the eaves of the roof and tries to listen at what's going on inside. In our modern context, an eavesdropper is anyone who listens in to something when they're not supposed to. Our winner from this contest was Brother Chris Ricci. He is the Tyler at Mount Ararat Lodge number 44 in Bel Air. Incidentally, Cowans have been a much bigger problem than eavesdroppers throughout history. In the late 1700s and on through into modern times, books have been written detailing how a person could sneak into a Masonic lodge. Though these books were originally seen as a nuisance, they remain some of the only written records of our early rituals and do provide some valuable clues as to how our rituals have changed somewhat over time. So, I guess we owe at least a small debt of gratitude to a few Cowans after all. This month's question is a two-parter. Who was our first Grand Master here in Maryland? Who was our first Maryland Grand Master, and what other high Masonic title did he hold prior to being elected Maryland's first Grand Master? Think you know the answer? Just send it to podcast@glmd.org, and you could be eligible for a great prize. That's going to wrap up this edition of the Common Gavel, and we thank you for joining us. Be sure to tune in next month. We will have a new Grand Master and a new Deputy Grand Master, but as usual, we'll be coming to you from here at the Grand Lodge of Maryland. Make it a great month.
If you're interested in becoming a Freemason or you have questions or comments about the Common Gavel podcast, email us. That address is podcast@glmd.org or visit mdmasons.org. The Common Gavel podcast is produced by Maynard Edwards in association with the Grand Lodge of Maryland. Your host has been Tom Foster, and I'm your announcer, Bob Chase.